Take that means maybe. So. How you doing?
So it's just. Call this meeting of the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee to order. John, you want to do the roll call? Actually, I'll pass it off to leader.
Timothy Welsh,
Oh, here.
Yolanda Hipsky, she's coming late, I think. Tamara Banks. Tamara, thank you. Jason
Rotten.
Broughton. Thank you.
Welcome.
Ruby Bravo here. Joe Rita. Justin Chenault. Rupert Farley.
Here.
Denise Flatley. Robert Fogg.
Here.
Glenn Goldsmith. Larry Gross. Michael Hoyt. Sandra DeGroot. Nicholas Kwatnowski. David McLaughlin.
Here.
Ken Poe. James Powell. Matthew Rowe. Rodney Thomas. Alan Watkins.
Here.
Clinton Wells.
Here.
And Kevin Wilkinson.
Just a point, Larry is here.
Okay.
And everybody, that is leader, our new planner and GIS technician. So she's actually replacing the former Connor Anderson, but she's here tonight and we are excited to have her on our team. All right, good deal. Let's see here. Do I have a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No, any nays? No, all right, agenda is approved. How about the meeting minutes from last meeting? Do we have a motion to approve this? Motion.
No, so I don't feel comfortable
okay.
making the motion.
It wasn't linked in the agenda packet that went out. Okay.
So
on
I
the
think
website.
we need
Yeah.
to
So we will
get
get, we will refer that to the next meeting. All righty, public comment. Anyone from the public like to speak?
Here's one, Chairman Welsh and members of the committee. My name is Gavin Gardo, the beautiful county of Spotsylvania. It's my habit at public meetings to try to thank everyone for being here. Down to do hard work that no one else likes to do. I don't like to usually advertise or show support for specific. That's what I always think that matters is people just coming together to speak. And bring their ideas together. By doing that, we find things what's best for everyone in our community. So thank you all for that.
Thank you. Spirited discussion. Any other public comments? Do we have any letters or emails, lovely emails from the public? No? All right. VDOT and transit report a problem. I haven't been down that side yet later. So I won't report it.
Well, we did get an update from
Route 17 at the county line, that it is on the to-do list. I think it's scheduled for this year. Yep.
This year.
Oh,
We
okay.
just didn't, I talked to Rich Sherlock. And it wasn't, certain of the exact date.
Right. Right, this
It's
year,
on their radar for
So,
this year.
in a couple months, we think. Okay, sounds good.
The only problem I see is all the truck accidents recently. Is VDOT keeping an account of all that, and can they,
At this intersection,
at any intersection, it just seems like there's been a lot of truck accidents.
we don't keep track of them so much as their fatalities and whatnot. We want to make sure that it's not an ongoing issue or problem area.
Okay, well,
And try to get that fixed so that it's safer.
It just seems to be a pattern, notice, and yeah, on the Route 17 interchange, seems quite a few accidents. So we need to get a count of that and see if it's really a problem area and what can be done about it.
All right.
Yeah, to add to that, I guess it was probably 2 months ago or so, I talked about exit 133, which is 17 onto I-95, that in the northbound exit, heading south, that there had been some truck haulers that had flipped and so forth. Now, within the last 2 weeks, there's been 2 that have flipped on the southbound exit, which is not a tight curve, which normally shouldn't have caused any kind of, flipping of the trucks and so forth, unless they were probably going at a high rate of speed, or if the vehicles weren't really secured to the trailer very well. But that's 4 that have happened on that particular exit in the last couple months.
And then there was a scrap metal guy on Route 3 a couple weeks ago too.
Right, yeah, that was a mess.
So, why such a long delay in completing the roundabout there, at the Celebrated Parkway? They definitely do not work every day at all, by any means. And when I said something to Meg Bomke, Saturday, she was shocked. And I told her that I'm hearing that the completion date is now pushed to the end of October. She was like, they had no idea why it's being drug out like this.
Yeah, I'm not, entirely sure, but I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, they show up and they'll work like half a day, then I don't see anybody for like 6 days, and then they show up and they work half a day, and I'm like, this is taking forever.
And we haven't had any hurricanes, that have
Yeah.
distracted us or snow events. So,
Right.
So I can certainly.
Yeah, because there's those,
What the schedule is, and obviously,
yeah, it's been pushed to the end of October now.
and if they've notified the folks that, need to know it's happened, so.
Yeah, okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
No problem.
Any other reporting of problems to VDOT? If not, we will move on to the next item number 7, action discussion items. The first one, CTAC River Crossing discussion, slides 1 through 3, prepared by Mr. Watkins.
Thank you.
Does a very good job, by the way.
Yes, very thorough.
Well, this, the purpose of all this is so that we can really get into a discussion regarding. At any point in time during the presentations, I want you to be involved as much as you can. If you don't understand why I kind of did one thing that I did, then please ask. If you see other options and other choices that should be considered anywhere along the line, please, because we are an advisory committee, and I think that we want to feel that we contribute to everything, and maybe sometimes our suggestions are not necessarily listened to, but this is such a major project that at some point when we do meet with the consultant and then some point in time report our discussions to the policy committee, I hope that we can be relatively solidified on what we think is going to be the best course of action. Okay. There's three of them and we'll go through them bit by bit by bit. So this particular one just deals with a map. I use GIS maps using topography sometimes, and sometimes I use parcels. The idea of using the parcels was so that you could get an idea of what properties might be impacted by any of the. Okay, the first thing I wanted to do was to talk about the different developments and kind of identify where they wind up being. In the north, of course, there's the Belmont Park development, the industrial development that's there. There's Celebrate Now, which is cleared and they're probably going to begin construction relatively soon. And down in the south, of course, there's the Villas and Celebrate. This, of course, was a silver company project, and this is a silver company project as well.
Can I explain something? The villages that Celebrate, are not approved.
No, I was
It's
gonna
a
get.
concept plan. It
Right,
hasn't been approved, and I talked to Scott Mayowski about it, and he says the land is designated as open space and can't be developed.
Which project are you referring to?
This project.
This one down here, okay.
okay. This is very, very similar to a project that they tried to advance, the silver company tried to advance in 2019. It was called the Villages at Greenback at that particular point in time. All the purple that you see is owned by the Celebrate Virginia, and of course, you know, it's Del Webb over there, but of course, there's Cannon Ridge down here, and you know, right now, everything ends at that particular point, but they still have plans in the works to still develop everything. Okay, all right, we can go on to the next one. Now, there's a new little project, oh, sorry, there's another new project that has been introduced, and this is called the Steubenville LLC Industrial Park. And this project is in the kind of reddish color that you see right up there. All right, that's a relatively very important piece of land. Now, what happened is, and this is also basically a subsidiary of the silver company. In 2021, late 2021, the Celebrate Virginia campus company basically granted it or sold it to Steubenville Capital LLC. Now, the way that I kind of found out that it's still a silver company or a subsidiary is the business address for Steubenville Capital LLC is on the same exact building in Boca Raton, Florida, as the silver companies. So what a surprise, right? This was purchased actually from Celebrate Virginia in January 2022 for $302,000, despite the fact that it's appraised at $2.4 million. So just like Belmont Park, actually, which is owned by Mid-Atlantic Real Estate Company, they sold it to Belmont Park LLC for $0 several years ago. So it's just a transference more than anything else. But the reason that this is pretty important is, and we'll get into this in some of the other slides going on further, but when we start to add the roadway pathways that have been presented so far, you'll see what the problem winds up being. Okay, we'll go on to the next. All right, these were the original plans that FAMPO had created before the consultant was involved. So we had option A over there in the red, which obviously would be impactful on Belmont Park, should that happen. Goes down south, crosses the bridge, crosses the river, pretty close to where I-95 is, and of course where the Quarry Lake is, and where the England Run stream is, right there. Either going down Celebrate Virginia or actually going down Greenbank Road, you would then be able to do option B, which is this kind of yellowish color, which of course you can see conflicts with potential approved property for the villages that Celebrate, and then crosses the river and connects to Gordon Sheldon Boulevard. C is the blue one, which again could be arrived at by various different ways. And it's basically the most direct route, crosses over, but of course, the silver companies Celebrate South Neon project wound up being directly in that path. So that was, that had to be modified. And of course, in green, with the Green Bank Road, it was going to be an extension at the very top where the Commerce Parkway was going to be extended. It was going to cross over, pass through a existing apartment complex that's owned by Celebrate Virginia. Then ultimately connect to Green Bank Road, go down all the way, and then, of course, you'd be able to use any of these different options. Option D being the furthest down into your Cannon Ridge and then across. Now, this winds up, of course, not connecting to Gordon Shelton Boulevard, but it was going to connect actually to the Carl D. Silver Parkway right at that point. So those were the original ones. Then, of course, the consultant has been making some modifications. And if we can go to the next slide, we'll see those. Okay. The method of getting to purple, option A, of course, it still uses Commerce Parkway, but it doesn't access it in the way it did before. Still goes through Belmont Park, goes a little bit further east. It is very close right here to a stream, which is called the Laurel Branch. It goes up there, and there's an RPA that's in that position, so it's close to that. It crosses within 100 feet of a home on Sanford Drive, and then actually was going to cross over another home that is kind of off of a side street from on England Run Lane. And then, of course, come pretty close, a little bit further away than the original FAMPO model, but then again, still cross and connect to Gordon Shelton Boulevard. B and C make use of Celebrate Virginia Parkway. B would, of course, still kind of interfere with the villas that Celebrate if that was to happen. And then, of course, C would go down further into Cannon Ridge, so forth. The difficulty with this particular C winds up being is the elevations are very varied here because there's several different streams that come in there. So this would involve a lot of changes to the topography to be able to accommodate that. And there also are bluffs that are here on the eastern side of the river that would be definitely difficult to kind of modify with too. The other thing with C is where it connects to Gordon Shelton Boulevard, it actually passes through two housing developments right there. There's a access road to get to the different housing developments, but it was going to pass right through there. Now, the other thing about D winds up being, it's somewhat similar. It still involves the widening of Green Bank Road, still basically follows the same path to get down to Carl D. Silver Parkway, but it was going to have to cross right through a stormwater basin that again is in that apartment complex that's above the Celebrate now. And the other problem, of course, winds up being is in order to be able to get to the Celebrate Virginia Parkway for B and for C, and to be able to get to D, you would have to cross at the over Celebrate Virginia Parkway and an intersection there. But of course, now there's the Steubenville property that is being developed. The permit that they were granted for that was to clear the property, so it's being detreed, and then also to grade it. That is all the permit is for. But in the permit, it mentions that it's also supposed to be for a future industrial park. Okay, it's only 13.7 acres, but again, because of its location right now, there could be a conflict involved with options B, C, or D because the property is being developed in the future, supposedly. Okay, wanted to point that out. Okay, all right. Go on to the next one. Okay. B2 is a new option that they have recently added. The reason that B2 was added is because you can see that B1 originally was potentially going to go through this particular Villas at Celebrate project, but now, of course, at the very end of the extended Celebrate Virginia Parkway, that winds up avoiding it. You can see both B1 and B2 do not interfere with the Neon project anymore, that it goes north of that before it connects to the Gordon Shelton Boulevard. Okay, all right,
Can I add something?
absolutely.
Okay, I just want to point out that there's supposed to be over 40,000 trips a day by 2050. And if you have a segment that's shorter like this versus B1, that let's say B1 is a quarter mile longer. Okay, so if you have 40,000 trips a day that have to drive a quarter mile longer, multiply 40,000 times a quarter mile, and you come up with 10,000 more miles per day of driving. So that's 10,000 more miles of air pollution and fuel usage. So I just want to point that out where the one corridor might have 10,000 miles less of driving than the other. Also on B1, this area here is has a load of historic sites on it. I guess that's like the overlook of the river, so they put cannon emplacements there and so forth. So I prefer the B2 option.
Was all this planned to be a 2-lane section through here or 4-lane?
Everything's supposed to be 4 lanes. It's supposed to have an additional bike and pedestrian path along the entire route. And the speed limit, I think, was 45 miles an hour,
It's the design speed,
design speed.
so accommodate most likely 35, but it accommodates because human behavior.
Right, okay, and that kind of matches a number of different things as well. I mean, what Joe said is very important, but keep in mind that besides, you know, whatever length that we're talking about for bridges or whatever, it's gonna be the entire length of what the entire route is that, you know, will have the impact of the 40 to 45. I think when the modeling was done in the report in June 2023, I think it was basically between 44 and 45,000 trips a day. That was the estimate at that point in time. Okay. All right, so B2 again now has less interference and so forth. Is there anything else that regarding any of this that, you know, anyone needs to discuss at this point?
Well, is the plan department of Stafford, I mean, are they requiring them to push Commerce Drive forward to Celebrate Virginia? Is that in the comprehensive plan up there?
The comprehensive plan actually added the extension for Commerce Parkway. So, you know, they were kind of, I guess you could say, blindsided a little bit. The permit was granted to do the clearing of the Steubenville property but more than a year ago, but nothing was done. And then all of a sudden, about a month ago, it started happening. So, you know, we have silver company, essentially the silver company. So they're kind of steering things is the way it looks. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing if we wind up having the opportunity to work with them. For example, any of these, this basically this project was divided into 2 segments. And if one ended up having the opportunity to, you know, continue that road and use the split that is in those segments, you know, working out an arrangement, then that could go forward and we still would have the opportunity to have those other paths be viable.
And I point something out, in 2003, Celebrate Virginia was rezoned. There were proffers that required a connection to Commerce Parkway from Celebrate Virginia Parkway. Now, the proffers are off-site, so technically it's hard to enforce because it's on, the proffers aren't on the property that on the RBC property, but it's on heavy industrial property. Just wanted to point that out.
The other, Joe brings up the point, Steubenville is zone M2 heavy industrial. So that could take place on that property no matter what. Now, it appears that that property may be by right property, because it didn't go before the planning commission whatsoever. They were unaware of it even taking place. It just went to the planning and zoning department. And then they ultimately did their testing, had all the different paperwork filled out and approved, and then they began doing the clearing and everything. But no one really knew that this was happening because it had been kind of sitting around for more than a year with no action being taken place. But now, of course, it's gonna potentially cause some modifications to any of the paths, perhaps. Okay. I can talk about the Celebrate Virginia Parkway a little bit later on, but there's some information I want to discuss about that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now some citizen modeled a different view, and of course that was me. Okay, but we are the, so these are just observations that I made from analysis that I made, and I decided that we might use a few other things. The original consultant's view for option A there, I moved where it winds up connecting to Commerce Parkway from where they had it. Where they had it actually before, where their paths were. And again, keep in mind, any lines that are drawn are simply just really lines on a map that will ultimately be modified one way or the other. That's obviously happened many times already. But the lines that the consultant had created, which was on the purple map in the previous slide, they were actually had paths that were going over existing buildings that were on Commerce Parkway and so forth. The other thing that I wound up doing, this is still, as you can see, now it avoids any of those existing buildings right now. So it's not interfering with them. Commerce Parkway, I mean, the path kind of came through here before, and if you recall, I said it was about 100 feet away from a home. And it was very close to the RPA, that's for the stream that goes through there. Well, I've moved it further east away from that so that it was not going to be interfering with the home, and it wasn't going to interfere with the RPA nearly as much. Now, there's a home that's right there, but it's been vacant for 6 years. And it's supposed to be torn down by the Belmont Park construction whenever they wind up doing that. So it is literally one piece of property that goes from here all the way on up to where it connects to Paul Lane. So that path going through Belmont Park that I have right now involves just one particular piece of property that a homeowner is in agreement to sell to Belmont Park people for use or utilization. I went further east, so it's further away from the homes that were in here. It still crosses the Laurel Branch at that point in time. I also moved it a little further away from where the England Run stream winds up connecting to Rappahannock, where it empties there. Basically because the England Run stream is a Chesapeake Bay watershed protected stream. And accordingly, that has to be at least 100 feet away from the stream. And the other thing that is in the easements, in the agreement that for any of the bridge crossings, is they have to be within 30 degrees of perpendicular to wherever it crosses the stream. So that's one of the things that, has to be considered for any of these. And at this point in time, see, all of these are relatively close to being perpendicular. The biggest change that I made is, well, I avoided the developments. C is still the same as it was before. It still crosses over, and it still goes in the middle of those two apartment complexes that are here. All right. My B is somewhat different than B1 and B2. I avoided the villages that celebrated entirely. I made it a little curvier, as you can see, so that it could cross perpendicularly. And I looked at the topography, and this winds up actually creating a somewhat shorter bridge than would have to be constructed with B1 or B2 and so forth. And the main change here actually winds up being D. I saw what was going to happen to Green Bank, and I think the consultant determined that there were going to be 63 different homes along Green Bank Road that were going to be impacted. That being the case, the widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes was going to be a tremendous disruption. it was gonna take a very large amount of time. It was most likely gonna be relatively expensive. So I said to myself, why would we, and of course, it was going through the other apartment complex, you know, at the end of Commerce Parkway. So I said, let's avoid all of that, let's have less impact, because I know specifically the Stafford supervisors said that they were not gonna be in support, or they wanted to have as little impact on businesses, commercial and residential homes. So obviously, this eliminates that, so all I did is I kept the southern route that D had before, but I also utilized Celebrate Virginia Parkway for it instead, using the existing infrastructure that is there. Celebrate Virginia Parkway, from where it would connect right there to down here at the end of, this is Banks Ford Parkway, it's 2.4 miles. All right, there's an additional 0.3 of a mile to get down to this part. So it's essentially around 3 miles of existing infrastructure. Now, there have been questions about whether or not Celebrate Virginia Parkway is viable for using this. There was a question that had been raised at one of the TAC meetings that the lanes might be too narrow. They're not. They are in accordance with basic rules and regulations of the road. Each of the lanes, all 4 lanes, are 12 feet wide, and all of the multiple turning lanes to get into all these different roadways that are branching off, those, the median up here is actually 35 feet wide. And down here at the southern part of it, it winds up being about 15 feet wide. So for all the turning lanes and the existing medians, they are very wide and capable of, again, handling the traffic. Now, when the previous project, the villages at Green Bank were supposed to be in this particular area, and it came before the planning commission in 2019. It was brought out by the agent who was representing the Silver Company that in 2003, when Celebrate Virginia Parkway was created, that it was designed to handle 64,500 vehicles a day. Okay. Now, that's obviously more than 44 or 45,000 that is anticipated to be added to that. He also said at that particular time, with all of these homes were constructed at that point in time, that it was handling 7,000 vehicles at that time per day. Okay. Now, obviously, the more built out this whole area winds up getting, the more traffic there would wind up being on that. That's why it was originally designed for the 66,500 vehicles a day, because there was supposed to be so much more that took place. So I do believe that, you know, again, there's a sidewalk, an 8-foot wide sidewalk along the entire length. So the bike and pedestrian path is there. There are storm water basins along the entire route, and stormwater drains, excuse me, that lead to stormwater basins throughout the entire route. It is lighted along the entire route. That's an added benefit that wasn't even intended to be included. So again, this is, again, just my looking at everything and saying, well, is there anything else we could do instead of what the consultant is currently modeling at this point in time? And that's where everyone here kind of comes into, you know, your thoughts. I'd love to be able to hear. If you want to please add anything, please.
So I appreciate you putting this together. I'm wondering, so I saw there were 2 models from the consultant. Is that second, the adjustments, was that after the comment period, the public comment period?
The B2
Yeah,
that they added, yeah, that was done
Yeah, those in response
within like a month and a half or so.
okay. So have they reopened or solicited additional comments since then?
Not that I'm aware.
So then that, I guess that leads me to the question of what would be our intent behind this sharing this model? Was that, my understanding is that the consultant is nearly complete, right? They're getting to the point where they're ready to start either developing or presenting their report. I'm not saying that your ideas are not
I understand.
good. I think, you know, in a lot of cases, they're very valid, but to what degree are they gonna be received?
Well, it's, the way I look at it is. If we can avoid any of the conflicts that would be posed by the current modeling that they're doing, like obviously avoiding the businesses and the commercial spaces that are along Commerce Parkway, where the path currently is drawn to come right over the top of them, which would cause right of way acquisition and so forth. To stay away from the stream and to stay away from as many residents as possible. Just seemed like it was a good idea. To basically, stay further away from the stream. Because of its protected nature that it needs to have, that seemed to make sense to me too. To come across and shorten the length of the bridge for this while avoiding the neon project at the same time. Made sense to me. And again, using Celebrate Virginia Parkway for D. Just jumped out of me before I even looked at anything else, because it essentially was the most western option. But it was going to be longer, it was going to involve all of the work that would be done to widen the road and impact all the different homes that are in Green Bay. So if we were using Celebrate Virginia potentially for B, B1 and C, well, why couldn't we use it to go down further into Cannon Ridge and combine it with A as well?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to imply that I didn't understand the rationale. I think there's a ton of good ideas here. You know, part of me wonders why the consultant didn't think to do any of this that you've done, but to the degree that I'm wondering, they're at the end of their rainbow, right? They're about to collect their pot of gold for work completed. What does it look like getting this in their hands and actually doing something?
Well, I guess they should. They're not vested in you, they are, because I don't know if they. But at the end of the day, most of the time, your consultants are not as vested. Or supervisors, as Joe and I both know, do the best you can, gather. Have other jobs, we are pulled to various events and stuff like that. Citizen complaints, right? So I think Alan's point here, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is for us. Provide this to board of supervisors and be able to say, look. A lot of thought, time, effort put into this, we'll give you. Version of what the consultants are presenting, and here's the reason. From the standpoint of Green Bank Road, I've said from day one, as you know, Alan, like that, whoever even thought Green Bank Road, like. They've obviously never drove it.
Mhm.
And the most controversial choice would be to use Green Bank Road, because every citizen that lives on that road will come out at the Board of Supervisors. They will be going to the newspaper. I mean, no Board of Supervisor in their right mind would ever even choose that option.
I think it's a no-go from.
Right from the beginning, like
But-
any consultant
but I
that put
think
that on there, obviously, like I said,
As
never
far
drove
as
that
the
road.
original FAMPO proposal of option D using that and the consultant using is because, as we know, we are still lacking a lot of information that we're ultimately going to get regarding the modeling that has been done. We don't know any of the traffic counts and what's going to be, the expense and what's going to be the amount of time that people would have to be on the road and what kinds of vehicles are going to use what kind of option and so forth. We don't know any of that yet. So I think it was important to put it there as a model just to get the data so you could then start to compare it to the other options.
But advising them to use infrastructure that is already in place is a huge cost savings. And when you're constantly looking at budgets and you're constantly looking at ways to like cut expenses and yet still improve infrastructure, it's a no-brainer, in my opinion, for the options to be either B, C, or D. I love what you did with A, but again, you're not utilizing infrastructure that's already in place.
When it comes down to it, it's about the dollar. And Celebrate Virginia Parkway will be the road.
Yeah.
Okay. If I were this Commonwealth Transportation Board guy, I'd say D is your option. Let's roll with it. I'll give you the money for the bridge and the developer can build a road to it. Right?
Yep.
Is that, Joe, is that still in the SSD, the Special Service District? Wasn't Celebrate in a Special Service District before?
Yeah, they're in a transportation,
Hmm?
CDA, Community Development.
CDA, right.
But that area also is, there's an agreement with the Department of Historic Resources.
Mhm.
That area too, that's needs to be renewed. But what I wanted to say is, if we really want to maximize the use of existing infrastructure, Celebrate Virginia Parkway is it. I mean, if you look at, other map showed it better, but if you looked at it, the aerial view of it, it's 6 lanes on half of it. And and the intersection splits up at Banks Ford, so that defuses the traffic in different directions to make traffic flow better. Then you also have the underpass on Route 17, so you don't have to make a left turn, just take the loop.
That's right.
And so
Oh, right.
that infrastructure, then it also has a sidewalk that goes under 17. So if you combine the trail system with that sidewalk, you can cross Route 17 without
Touch on.
pedestrians and traffic.
Like I can give you even.
So there's so many different benefits to it. And I presented these benefits in a presentation to this committee about 2 years ago. So what I'd like to do is at the next meeting is have a presentation and I'll revise it some. Like to, put it back, kind of like
Al did.
Alan's presentation here.
All right. Any other?
What kind of kickback are you gonna get from all the residents that bought in that thinking they're buying into a golf course community? Is that gonna?
You mean the Celebrate people?
Yeah,
There is no golf.
I mean,
Golf course is defunct.
yeah.
The
and-
one that was leading the charge against it, she moved.
She's got new people.
She
Yeah.
moved to Fairfax.
But there are literally hundreds and hundreds of people that live there.
But there are many that support it, that been contacting me, and they support it because they're 3 miles closer to the hospital.
Yeah.
Just say,
And
think
that's,
Administrator.
how it's presented to the community. If it's presented as this is going to provide you easier access to get to things you need, such as medical, versus right now, I think all they've heard is increased traffic, more vehicles are gonna be driving through here. It just needs to be presented differently to them.
Ian?
It's gonna most certainly
Thank you,
change their lives.
I won't interfere with your deliberations, but just a couple of pieces of additional information. So if you look at Alan's proposal for option A versus the proposal of the consultant for option A versus the proposal from FAMPO staff for option A, the only thing that matters in the modeling is not where you draw that line. What matters for the modeling is where it connects to the road network on each side. It's not about where the line is. The traffic demand model and the micro simulation doesn't care where the line is. It's just looking at where it connects to the rest of the roadway network on both sides. And the travel demand model doesn't even care about traffic lights. It just estimates the amount of traffic. Then there's a second modeling process, which then builds onto that first modeling process, and it builds in a micro simulation of the traffic lights, the turning circles, the turning
Queue,
lanes, the
it's-
queue length, the queue jumps and all that sort of thing, to model how that would increase or decrease the traffic, right? So there isn't much point going to the consultant and saying, hey, if you just move this road a little bit there, it'll be much better for the modeling.
Got
It will affect the environmental investigation, but it will not affect the modeling one iota. So it doesn't matter. You don't need to go back to the consultant and say, hey, if you just model this, the modeling doesn't care where you move the line 300 feet that way or 500 feet that way. What it cares about is which road you connect to. Now, one of the things that Alan has changed from what the consultant has proposed is that instead of option A having a smooth turn and connecting directly into Commerce Parkway, he's put a T-junction there. Now that is going to severely impede the traffic, right? So that will have an impact on the model, where he's made that T. Because instead of it being a smooth curve and carrying straight on up Commerce Parkway, it can't now. It has to come to a stop because it's a sharp 90-degree turn with another road. You'll have to have probably a traffic light. I don't know what you'll
We
have to
can talk
have.
about that in the next
So,
one.
so those are the things that matter, not where the line is. The line only matters when it comes to the environmental assessment, which is, are you going to affect a river or a stream? Are you going to affect somebody's house? And that kind of thing. So that matters from an environmental point of view, but it does not affect the modeling. So the modeling is not going to give you very much different output if you slightly move those lines, because it's going to count the traffic based on the access and the egress points. And then it's going to add to that the impact of traffic lights and circles and that sort of thing to calculate how that traffic light is going to slow down the traffic and reduce or increase the number of cars. So the consultant must carry on and do their work on the modeling. This is not going to affect it. Second thing is, we're only picking rough corridors in this study. The final alignment is going to be done in the next phase by VDOT. So once we've got a rough idea of where we want to put the road, we then have to apply for funding. If FAMPO and Stafford and the city of Fredericksburg agree with the rough idea of where the alignment is going to be, then we go and look for money. And if we get the money, VDOT will then take over and they will have their engineers do what we call P&E, which is planning and engineering, but it's not really planning.
But it's geology.
And they then take another look at the route and go, we can save 3 factories and this rare tree if we move this road a little bit, move it that way. And then what they do is that they modify that route to be more acceptable. So there's multiple phases of the alignment that will be occurring into the future if this project moves ahead. And still suggests modifications right through this process, because engineers will finally have to make a designation. And then 2 quick more points. The trouble with that nice light green option there is that you can't fully see the topography from a map like this. That is the widest valley across the river of all the options. And so while that piece of roadway looks very short and you think it's cheap, it's going to have the biggest bridge of all of the options because the river valley is so wide at that point. Option A, the river valley is narrower, etc. Right? So bear in mind you've got using existing roadway and you've got a short piece of road, but that is a massive bridge. So you can't assume automatically because the length is shorter that it's cheaper. It may still not be that cheap, but we don't know that yet. The consultant is still going to do a cost estimate.
And if I can
And
piggyback,
John is going to do a second presentation on the same subject now
Well,
to talk
we have 2 more,
about,
we have 2 more slide presentations actually.
the corridor and how that's developed.
I'll just go ahead and peel back a little bit of the curtain, like the option D with extending it down. The consultants had internal discussions about that, but they're saying the only reason to extend it further down would be if there was a better point to kind of connect it to Fall Hill, Shelton, or Carl D. Silver. They didn't feel like that was a better spot to necessarily tie it in, and the only thing you're doing at that point in time is consuming more land and easement and adding length cost. So that's the reason why they didn't advance kind of a, I would say, a far south option C/D, what you're seeing here. And the other item, just getting to kind of looking at the network as kind of a connection, is Green Bank connected into Celebrate Virginia at the very southern section. So it's a question of, are folks from further on 17 West going to use Green Bank as a shortcut getting it down, or do we need to tie it off? But if we go ahead and make that decision, then we don't know how much of a burden or traffic shift we would see between the two modeling options. So it's kind of like ignore the immediate kind of what are the adjacent neighborhoods or properties and say these are existing connections. Are we going to expect basically 30,000 cars to come down Green Bank unless we tie off kind of at that southern section where it kind of comes in and then crosses, or does it need improvement? Is there a major exchange with all of a sudden if you have all the traffic from further north and east coming down Commerce and using Celebrate down to the bridge, and then traffic further west on 17 that uses a different alternative, and so you're funneling it down in a different way? It was for that modeling exercise. They're looking at, this is an existing public road, do we need to accommodate kind of that level of traffic before we make a call on which neighborhood impacts? Because we had to do that environmental and land use assessment prior, but we had to say, should we model this, yes or no? And that was the view, as it connects. If the road connects, people will use it. We need to figure out a plan to accommodate that or close off that section at the bottom. We have more discussions with that, even with option A up top later.
Okay, I'd like to say one thing, a longer bridge isn't necessarily a bad thing. First of all, the piers only impact a smaller area, so it's actually more environmentally friendly. Second, the trail system that goes underneath the bridge won't be impacted, and you can expand the trails more because they can go underneath. So those are the benefits of a longer bridge. Now, on option A, where it crosses Sanford Drive, that's designated to be
Overpass.
what do you call it? A grade separated intersection. So that intersection there is you're gonna have to have an underpass to it, and that's gonna cost another $40 to $60 million just for that alone. So I think that will definitely offset the cost of any longer bridge.
I mean, ultimately, one of the concerns that I had, well, it's Belmont Park, and that's the next slideshow after this, so we'll get to that in a second. This is just a topographical map of the same exact consultant. One of the nice things about D that I talked about is these are very, very different elevations along here. The elevation here in kind of brown winds up being at 230 feet. So it maintains all the work that you have to do to kind of, orchestrate this versus maintaining a smoother route as far as elevations wind up going. And Mr. Hollis is completely correct about this being a longer bridge. It would wind up being, because this is a topographical map, and if on the slides, if you actually zoom in and really close, you will be able to see all the contour lines. This winds up being around 180 feet at that particular point, and you do not reach 180 feet until you get to this particular point, which is the reason that this is a longer span. I did actually analyze the I-95 bridge and compare it to the other ones. And the option A bridge is going to be exactly the same as far as the length goes for the I-95 bridge. And C and D are not very far removed. They're pretty similar in length as well, but B definitely would wind up being a longer bridge. The question is, how much savings do you wind up gaining because of the fact that the roadway itself is somewhat short? You'd have to, be able to compare apples and oranges, and we can't do that right now. So again, this is in the slideshow that's presented for you. You can look at it in much greater detail if you zoom in really closely. And like Mr. Hollis said as well, regarding where A winds up connecting into Commerce, well, we can look at that in the next slideshow really quickly, and I'll try to breeze right through that as much as possible. Okay. So. Okay, I wanted to show you the side-by-side comparison of the two. So you can see the consultant's option versus the citizens' options. And this winds up being south of the river and so forth. So, again, you can kind of look at them and be able to see what the difference is. D is essentially the same. C is other than the fact that it connects to Celebrated Virginia Parkway in the citizens one. B1 and B2. Slightly different, but also avoiding the neon project and avoiding these particular potential developments, as opposed to B1 interfering possibly in B2 doing a pretty good job at avoiding it. And again, a little bit further away from where the stream winds up emptying into the Rappahannock Foray. Okay, so that's that. We can move on. All right, now north of the river. And what Mr. Hollis was talking about is these curves that we have here, if you were going to be able to use option A. And again, that could be done, but I suppose if you really wanted to, well, where this citizens option interferes or connects to Commerce, that could be modified obviously up there too. But again, as it is right now, there are businesses there that are impacted somewhat. This homeowner that I talked about, that's right there, that's 100 feet away from their home. This one actually going over this home here, once we get to the point that I was looking at moving it further away so it doesn't interfere with where the homes are and so forth. Okay. I'm sorry, go back one more. I just wanted to. Yeah.
Yep, that's the one.
Okay. All right, I wanted you to know that this A and this A are in exactly the same positions on the map. So this is one way to be able to tell that it's further east. Okay, that's all. Okay. Okay. Commerce Parkway is like the key for almost everything because of the fact that all the different options wind up connecting some way. All right. Whether or not here's where it ends right now. This is a wrestling center right now. There's the Steubenville LLC property that you can see right there. So right now is in that position, and Belmont Park is outlined by the red over there. So Steubenville again has been begun to be cleared. And access at the end of Commerce Parkway through this travel, you kind of can't really see it on here. This isn't 4K, is it? But the construction is going on, and this from Celebrate Virginia Parkway, you can kind of see how the clearings are going on. I inquired why there were no permits that were displayed anywhere, and a week later they were there. So this, like I said, it was at a policy committee actually that some of the citizens, the residents of the Del Webb community asked the policy committee, what's going on, south of where the FBI building is. And the FBI building is right there. So that's essentially what's, that prompted me to investigate a little bit more. Now, the other thing about Commerce Parkway, as it goes across 17, it connects to Plantation Drive, which is supposed to be the continuing route north as we head towards Truslow Road and Enon Road, and then the connector that's planned to be developed that goes up to Center Fort Park. So, and again, 44,000 to 45,000 feet. There was a modeling that was done in June 2023. It is, Commerce Parkway is only 3 lanes wide. So obviously it's going to have to be modified in one way or another down the road. And okay,
Excuse me, you said the FBI building was up there. Isn't the FBI building just above where it says Steubenville?
Yeah, it's
yes,
all.
right there, yes.
No,
I'm-
no, just
Yeah.
above the ST in Steubenville.
Yeah,
Right there.
Right there, yes.
It's right there.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Yes. No, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it is right there. I'm.
Right
sorry.
across from the
I'm sorry,
apartments.
right there. Yeah, you're right. Okay, because you can see they actually got the track for.
Where they are.
Yeah.
Italian.
I striped that track. It wasn't easy either.
But
Not,
again,
not to satisfy the government anyway.
you can wind up seeing the apartment complex that is already there. And again, it was gonna go right through there for option D and so forth. Okay, next slide. Okay, the bike and pedestrian needs. Okay, I just had located where the bridges potentially would be, so you can kind of see them there. And I modeled exactly where in option A, where the bridge would look like in relation to where it exists with I-95 right now. So here's I-95 crossing the Rappahannock, and this would be option A. It winds up being 900 feet away, according to the consultant's plan from I-95. Now, as far as the bike and pedestrian needs, again, it's gonna be somewhat similar to this in that you're gonna have a bike and pedestrian path that goes alongside it. And I heard talk that there was supposed to be a bump out at some point in time, so there'd be like an observation deck for people looking. So the question winds up being is, if you're going to try to get bicyclists and joggers and walkers to wind up using that, I certainly can imagine that if I was north of the river, that in order to get down to, Celebrate Virginia South and the, Central Park, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I have a definitive goal, a reason for actually going south along the bridge to be able to get to those spots, even if I'm just jogging or whatever. Why in the world would anyone who lives down south of the river go to visit something on Route 17? Not really a very attractive area as far as the reasons that you would probably want to be able to use a bicycle or to jog across the river and so forth, unless you just wanted to do it for exercise or something like that. That gets into the whole Belmont Park area, and we'll see in the next slideshow exactly what I'm talking about. But again, if you're using the bike pedestrian path, that's along here. All right, if you look in whatever direction it is, if you look in one direction, you're going to be able to see the expanse of the river. But if you're looking in the other direction, you're going to see I-95. Not again, the most attractive view, and also noise-wise, probably be quite noisy as well. So consider that, and I've already actually spoken to the FAMPO Bike and Pedestrian Committee regarding this months ago, talking about what do they think would be more beneficial as far as use for a bike and pedestrian. Okay, next slide. Okay, and again, I had talked about Celebrate Virginia Parkway. This is the median down the south area before it approaches Banksport Parkway right along here. Storm drains everywhere, the 8-foot wide path that would be there, the lighted areas, it pretty as anything, or just, it would be an attractive way to actually pass. It's this distance from Banksport to the end, like I said, is about 3/10 of a mile. This is in the Planning Commission from June 12th, 2019, where the agent record told us that there were 7,000 cars on the road at the time, but that it was available or built, that the original plan development anticipated 66,500 vehicles per day.
Can I add something?
The median there is designed for low impact development, so the runoff goes into the grassy area, gets filtered out before it goes to the storm drain. So it's more of an environmentally friendly process if we pick that corridor.
All right, concerns about the quarry and again, this red line is 100 feet away from where the stream, England Run, empties into the Rappahannock River. This is 100 feet away from where the quarry is. This is the route that's planned. Again, it has to be within 30 degrees of being perpendicular and just accommodates that, so that's not really a problem. But one of the things it does interfere with is in the comprehensive plan for the city of Fredericksburg. There is the Wild Riverfront Park development, which essentially takes the quarry and provides access along the quarry. So if there was going to be a roadway that was right in that particular area, I think that would probably interfere with that whole concept. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And there's the written description of Wild Riverfront Park. I think it's on page 19 in the comprehensive plan for the city of Fredericksburg.
All four options will go through the Wild Riverfront Park.
Excuse me?
All four options, or 5 options, will all go through that Riverfront Park.
Yeah, it's
So
the
you
entire
can
place.
stop where you.
Well, that's supposedly where they have it located in this area.
Well, they.
I can get to it.
John will show you just now a map of the whole environmental plan for that whole riverbank and all four of them.
Well, I'm not saying that it wouldn't interfere with any of the other plans that they have. I'm just saying that what they intend to do here, as far as the activities, that really wouldn't be viable if the roadway was there. Okay. You're gonna be talking about all this.
I got the updated one, yep.
Because one of the most important things that we haven't even discussed yet are the easements. And the easements basically push everything towards using natural land. I mean, I don't know what the priority is or how easements could potentially be involved or how to get around them or whatnot. But you can see in the map that there are no easements, whether they're co-held or whatever, that are east of the England Run stream and actually right up to the quarry too. But once you get into any of the other areas, then there are easements that are in place. And we know that Friends of the Rappahannock, et cetera, are very concerned about losing, the easements that they currently have. Okay, thanks. Okay. One more quick. Belmont Park winds up being kind of involved with all this because of the location of it, the fact that option A goes through. Excellent. All right, Google 3D map. Basically, we have Celebrate Virginia Parkway right here. Well, you can go to the next slide, actually. All the different traffic lights where they exist along Route 17. Commerce Parkway right here, Power Line right here, and Plantation Drive right there. There are a lot of traffic lights along there. Where Belmont Park is, and we can go to the next slide. Belmont Park, the way it was drawn up and recommended to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors, is that the main egress to Belmont Park is along Power Line. We're talking about 450 tractor trailers a day, anticipated and stuff like that. They will only have right way out or right way in, which means that none of the vehicles that would be traveling along Route 17 in a northwesterly direction would be able to use Powell Lane whatsoever. So that is why there's a proffer that Belmont Park offered for retiming and redevelopment of the Commerce Parkway intersection. Because so many of the vehicles are are going to have to ultimately get to Belmont Park by using Commerce Parkway and the traffic intersection like that it has, and then go down what is known as Capitol Avenue to get to Powell Lane to ultimately get into Belmont Park. So I just wanted to point all that out.
Right in, right out, Powell Lane, left in, left out, Commerce Parkway.
But because it has the traffic light, you're gonna be able to go in and out using that intersection. But again, Commerce Parkway right now is just, it's not even 4 lanes here. And of course, this is the extension that we were hoping for. Okay, next. Okay, the way it was developed. Heavy industrial for M2, M1 over here in this area. Okay, this is Sanford Drive, by the way. Okay. Riverside Drive down here. Okay. And next. Okay, the original concept plan. This building is the only building that they have a user to occupy. None of the other spaces have potential users. This, the A. Dewey Pile trucking firm wants to use this particular part of the property. All right, they have nothing else for the other areas. Yeah. Okay. The proffer of 5 acres to be used for recreational purposes was proffered by Belmont Park to the county. So there's 5 acres that are in that particular area. But again, this is the only area that's currently intended to be used. We see the Steubenville property, we see Celebrate now, so you can kind of see, you know, what was all going on there. Okay, next slide. Okay, the consultant's options. Right, again, going over some of the buildings, that's why it's circled right there. My question here is, as it was going to cross over Powell Lane, what kind of intersection would that be if there are tractor trailers that are potentially crossing here? Because if there are 44,000 vehicles potentially using this a day, that is going to be a point of contention where you would have vehicles trying to leave the area here or the other developments that happen here, as opposed to, you know, are we going to need another overpass there besides the overpass that would be necessary over Sanford Drive as well? I don't know. Consultant again, right here, they're right in the stream RPA area. So that was that. And they also actually were going over the top of a home that was in that area. Okay, no problem.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
The Belmont Park proffer a connection road between the east side and the west side going across option 1, so there'll be another intersection there too. Proffers are county law, so.
Okay. As far as Steubenville goes, you know, again, this is there were going to be other, you know, other concerns there. These are the consultant, excuse me, the citizens options again. I moved this away. This is a stand here right now, but it's available for this paving company right here. There is a new Vulcan Materials concrete production plant that's going to be in here. That's also been added. And again, going further east, away from the RPA, this is the home that's going to be destroyed on this property here. And again, going further away from where the homeowner is tucked away in that area right there. Okay, and it can, you know, B, C, and D in the citizens plan, we will make use of Celebrate Virginia Park. Okay. And then if you were to compare the option locations, you can see consultants options, the citizens options. Option D in the consultants, B1, B2, and C along Celebrate. And if you were using the citizens would be B, C, and D using Celebrate Virginia Park. Now, remember I said as far as the bikes and pedestrians, there is effort still to try to develop this land similar to how the consultant originally wanted to do it back in 2021. This entire 132 acres was supposed to be for sports tourism. There were gonna be baseball fields, little league fields, soccer fields, 2 indoor athletic facilities. If you were a bike and pedestrian or bicyclist and pedestrian walking or jogging, and you were going along there, would that be a better reason for using it to be able to get to, that kind of recreational use as opposed to all the other options that currently exist for the industrial uses. So Mr. Breeder and myself and several other people are continuing to kind of push to bring recreation to Stafford County in this area because there isn't any. Okay. I don't know if that's the last slide. All right, I'm done. Sorry.
Good job. Man. Those are nice maps. I'm enthralled.
All right, thank you.
Next item is another talk.
Yeah, this big update. I'm actually gonna stand up at the.
John's update on the study.
All right, I will be quick, but I encourage y'all to interrupt me as much as you want, but I won't be holding it. Before I do that, I'm gonna go hit the AC button real quick.
Oh, John, let me do that. One for cooler.
All right. So most of this information was from the prior stakeholder meeting in the last month. Al often attends, and this is just information that is put out and folks can observe. So I'll be touching a lot of that. Just a reminder, when we're talking about the corridors, we're actually intentionally drawing the width a lot larger to try to account for more impacts so that the actual width of the road is narrower, and so that once you get later on, you can start bending and curving the actual footprint while still capturing how much kind of potential impact you will be, so that you're not, say, discounting this section just because you know you can probably bend it around. Go ahead and count it.
Does everybody understand that? Because all of the environmental metrics presuppose that you understand what's going on here. That 250-foot buffer is more than twice what will actually be built. It's
More than twice what the right of way is.
yeah. So it means that the consultant is allowing for more than double the land that you actually need to just be thorough in terms of checking things that are close by or could possibly be impacted. But if you look at the very far right diagram, that is what will be built in reality, because the VDOT engineers will try to avoid historical resources or natural resources or somebody's house. So they will bend the road to fit around obvious environmental concerns. You know, if there was a graveyard, you wouldn't build a road over the graveyard, you would shift the roadway over. But the left one is the space that the environmental study is run on. The far right one is what you have to build in practice, so it is much less impact than what the environmental summary indicates.
Okay. So environmental screening. So as we've already mentioned, here are the preliminary options. They are drawn and designed out. The consultants have been actually working and tweaking those. In the initial proposal with option A, there was never really an intent to connect with Celebrate Virginia here. However, at some stage, for whatever reason, that actually worked its way into this discussions, and we're just making it clear that for option A, there is no connection with Celebrate Virginia. There was concerns that all of a sudden Celebrate Virginia would use this as a way to access 17.
But John, I think that dotted line is potentially
Can be added later, yes.
It doesn't have to be bold. It's more accurate.
They've also shortened how the connections happen for B1, B2, and option C, and how it curves into Celebrate Virginia. They're also proposing, as folks said, what about Powell Lane, Capitol Avenue? They're actually looking that they're going to cul-de-sac those. They'll actually nip off some of those entrances access to prioritize flow through from Commerce Parkway through, rather than allowing folks to basically try to cut on Howard Capitol in that same area. And finally, they're aware of the Steubenville thing. It's a grading site at this point in time. It's still an empty lot. So they're aware, they're watching it. As soon as there's a change on the Stafford County's proposed plans, I think they're probably refreshing it at a rate just slightly behind Al. But they are aware and they're watching for anything to pop up that would impact, and that goes for all the developments in general along the corridor.
Can you go back, there's one more thing,
Yes.
for option A, just it's between the stream and Powell Lane, there's a little white spot. That is, I don't know if they're aware, but that is a cell tower.
Yes, they're aware. It's counted in it'll later say other structures. That's actually one of the other structures that's noted, so later, it's counted. So they are taking their all available secondary sources. That just means they're not actually going and actually doing land surveying account. It's pulling from GIS tools from the county, states, and other jurisdictions. The consultants themselves separated things into high and medium impacts based on what they're comparing it to. So the options are being compared against each other, and they're just scored in a green for most favorable or least impact, moderate that says there's something here, it would need to be addressed, or less favorable, highest impact in red if it's kind of not the preferred result. So in the preliminary screenings, this is the big table. So as we've noted, there's a lot of conservation easements. And you can see that option C, and to a lesser extent, option B kind of hit those conservation easements relatively hard. Less so for option B1, a little bit less than B2, surprisingly enough. Actually, that shorter segment across actually has more impact on the conservation easements. Option A has the least 1 acre. It also counts the trails, so option B1 reaches slightly more trails than option A, or option B2 and C. Option D does not actually connect or cross any trails.
No build is best.
Up until the traffic analysis, my guess. Resource protection area and preservation area, as well as floodplains, we rank those. I'm going to get into those a little bit because the consultants kind of said those were recommended, and they think that there's a little bit of double counting happening because all of resource protection areas are exactly where our stream beds are. So they're going to look back and see what happens, because if you look at, actually I'll wait to that. One has more of an impact. It depends on which one you decide to count, means one actually starts looking better than the other. So they are going to dive into that and do a little bit more research. Farmland soils is kind of interesting, that who would have thought that a golf course would be placed where the best soils are. That's kind of their finding. The one asterisk is that we're in an urbanized area. They're keeping an eye on both the approved and proposed developments. So as anything that comes online, this table and chart would defer up until they make their final recommendations and final product. And then we also have our cultural resources, and they've been working hard with the built environment. So since kind of the initial range with both zoning changes, as well as they've been making tweaks to those corridors, that the number of structures initially proposed, particularly residential structures, has actually dropped. So it used to be that all of them had something. Now B and C have 0, and there's one property, and I was kind of highlighting, it's a trapezoidal kind of property. Its frontage is much larger than the rear kind of back line of the property. And depending on how they curve it, they can keep bumping it further west, but they're like, we keep kind of potentially nicking it on that corner, and we can do a zoom in, but they're like, let's just go ahead and count it. They think they can miss it, but they're going to do it. And then parcels with other existing structures, this is where you're seeing the cell phone towers included, so they are there.
Okay, these impacts are based on a 250-foot wide swamp.
Yep.
Yeah, so in actuality, it's gonna be half of the impact.
It depends, we don't want to discount that it could be less or more. So, but this is what we're doing, this is what is being counted. So it could be less, it could be exactly that, depending on how they have to route the road. So again, resource protection area, and this is one of the ones that we wanted to point out, is that if we look at the resource protection areas, which actually only goes up to Sanford Drive, actually points north or outside of it. It's kind of a weird trick. But option C starts looking very, very good. If we start looking at how many feet of streams you're impacting, it's actually nearly double, or actually more than double, option B. So this is actually something the consultants are going back and looking. It's like, we are kind of counting the same thing here, but depending on which one we count and how we want to do it is, we could actually be recommending different options that have a more, they're going to come back and look at this a little bit more and make a recommendation coming out of which one they think is a more appropriate one to really factor into the environmental discussions. They're going to list both, but they do think they're double counting.
Looks like Mobile gets the best score again.
Is there a way to separate the stream impacts
Well,
of a direct impact from a road going over the stream versus a bridge going over the stream? Bridge wouldn't have the impacts of a road going over the
okay,
stream.
we can talk to this because this would be like, what happens if we start moving, say, option A further east? Is you start actually hitting more streams, and there is a wetland in this area too. So when the consultants were doing, they were trying to optimize each kind of corridor within the best thing. It's really going to be hard to tease out resource protection area without the streams because they are in the stream beds. Like that's it. It's just a question of which one do you place more emphasis? Because do these streams, north of Sanford count just as the headwaters basically, just as much as just cross the road slightly down, and that's something that they wanted to wrestle with.
On the earlier slide, it had a Rappahannock protection area.
Yeah,
What is that?
oh boy. I think that is more along the Rappahannock itself.
Okay.
Not necessarily some of the tributaries. I think a few of the tributaries might fall into it, but I'm completely blanking on that exact definition right now. But that is something that they are building in.
I have a question. So maybe it's sort of beyond our scope, but is there a sweet spot between protecting a projected cost and minimal impact that's been projected on this study?
Well, that's going to be an interesting thing because this is pre-NEPA. A lot of times when you go through the NEPA process, the one thing that you can't really talk about is cost. You can't just pick a cost cheaper, you can mitigate a lot of the impacts. And so this is solely building the inventory and assessment for that. We're getting to planning level costs, so we are still at 30,000 feet. The consultants will bring us, if they have a preferred option in which to go further down, they'll give us like the next level, something that can be used for acquiring funding, but it's not going to be, where can we shave $1 million left and right, depending on a couple of different options. We're gonna get very kind of wide ranges there.
Could they look at option D by hooking it to Celebrate Virginia and see what those numbers spit out?
I can definitely ask and see if we did, because that was one of those things that we discussed, is that this is just kind of generally riddled with a lot more easements, you would start hitting more streams and coming across.
Well, it runs down the ridge. There ain't no damn streams from Celebrate Virginia Parkway to the river. Where you getting hit with the streams is up there where you're going back over to Commerce.
That's that, it's here and it's here as well. But kind of just getting back, or was master ones?
C deals with a lot of streams.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to point out, can you go back to that? Okay, now that screenshot there is in our packet. Okay, but you look at the policy committee packet, that screenshot is not in their presentation. So why is that?
It should be, it's just further down in the
It's
packet.
not, because I looked at it earlier.
Which screenshot?
This right here is not in the policy
It
committee.
should be. This is the one we moved from this slide 7
put it.
And I think there's a couple more that might not be in it too, right? Specifically, so. Notice this is.
Duplicated this package for the policy committee and added 2 extra slides, so it should be in there.
Okay, well,
I-
from the email that, I got, it's not. So I shared it online and then I noticed that somebody asked me a question about the impact and I went and looked at it and said, wait a minute, that doesn't have this screen on it, so.
What page is that screen now going
This
to?
was 7. This was one where you said bump it into after the explanations, but I bumped it up through.
I'll go and have a look.
Okay. City of Fredericksburg also asked us to look at some of their kind of small area plans. And the reason specifically for this is that Stafford County, most of the property north of it does not have any preserved open space outside the easements. Fredericksburg actually has an additional layer through its comprehensive plan, and we've even actually talked about the civic use. In the last stakeholder meeting, we asked about, okay, what about the water park? Is there something here? They're saying for this property, it was more about the proposed interchange exit that they were holding on to. So that's kind of what that civic, we're asking, should we count it along with the preserved or open space? And they, city staff said, probably we don't need to count that there. But they are concerned, some of the city was preserving this open space and they were just saying, tell us how the options impact each one of those because they want to conserve the most there. Stafford, because these are all easements, of course, these are easements too, just didn't have like a designated park or preserved open space, so it wasn't included north of the river. But if that was added at some point in time, that could always change. And then, of course, the farmland soils. And coming back to this is that they noted that because this is it within FAMPO's urbanized area, the NEPA process would kind of be like, you're in the urbanized area, we don't really look at farmland soils. It's good to know, it's good. It was actually interesting to know how much of particularly this peninsula was still considered to be prime farmland, or at least options there. So we took that assessment into consideration.
And no bill gets the best score again, hey.
Yeah, this is a good thing because it's the end of the first quarter. So again, here are the quarters. I put up the current parcels, particularly parcels with occupied units as well. And you can see this is the one little sliver for option A, but otherwise it's been further west than some of yours. You can see that it does have heavy impacts to Green Bank, particularly as it comes around Santa Drive there. And then of how it can hook and around and through basically existing intersection that's built through kind of a housing area to the south. So now modeling update. I said we're at the end of the first quarter. The environmental is one section. We got good news on the modeling. The raw, and I mean, this is what the numbers are out for the modeling, not the fancy maps that show the congestion and everything. But because the numbers are out there, being able to feed that into the market simulation analysis. This is what caused kind of the delay earlier this month. Basically, the model, the VSIM model, the software that VDOT used and the consultants used, disagreed and they didn't want to talk to each other. So we had to fix that. We've since fixed that. Actually, I can now say that VDOT has said the model looked good. They want to add the roundabout on Banks Ford and Celebrate. They're like, do it. But they're also, the consultants were like, how temporary is this treatment? We're like, go ahead, assume that that's the base year for now and 2050. So that's going to take that into consideration. And then they're going to bring us more information about how each intersection, how the traffic is both flowing to and from the bridge, as well as the intersections, basically in a large swath around the study area, including Route 3, Route 17, and points even on the other side of the interstate in the city of Fredericksburg. So we'll have intersection level of services and travel times. We'll be able to say, if you need to go from point A to point B, how far is that going to take you depending on where you're moving, particularly across the river?
Wasn't the Harrison added since?
Yes. So yes, the Harrison Road interchange is being added to, I want to say option B1, might be B2. But one of the center options of just saying, let's, because they're not going to model it for each one of the runs, that'll be new model runs for everything. But they're going to do one to say, okay, if you do the river crossing and Harrison, what's the net effect, particularly on route? We are waiting that, that's in process, and we should be getting all numbers out, but it just won't be used.
You mentioned, are they also including the route north, commerce to
Ena,
England Run? And,
Ena,
I mean, they're doing the full build out of our,
They're not trying to north of US 17.
yeah, well, the model's functioning, but they're not really drilling down on that. So they'll have an idea of the traffic that's coming south based on the 2050 network. And that's gonna be one major difference between what we've done here internally. Like previously, we've only said if you just drop the river crossing it with no other improvements, what's the impact? They're now looking at our full build out in the next, several years, if not decades, and saying, okay, what does that happen with the full build out? Yes.
You said that, you'd be looking at the modeling for Harrison Road interchange versus, and how that would affect, and this would affect Route 3 West. Okay, what kind of a timeline, if this happened, what kind of a timeline would this have in relation to an interchange at Harrison Road? Any ideas at all? Or would Harrison
So
Road
any
just be a dream?
Any of these projects takes 10 years, they're not, you don't build this in 5 minutes. And
Right.
the model run they're doing is for up to the year 2050. So it assumes that by 2050, both the Harrison Road interchange and this river crossing bridge is built. But it doesn't say we're going to build it in 2032 or 2033. It's not. It tries to look at the long-term impacts rather than tomorrow.
What I'm fearful of is that this will get built and Harrison Road will never get built. And what's gonna happen to Spotsylvania and Route 3 West?
So
Because I haven't been on this very long, but just still seeing the maps, I see this project as being a project to get people from Western Stafford and Hartwood area to Central Park. I don't see this as a regional project at all. Because it doesn't help Spotsylvania any whatsoever.
I don't agree with that.
And, because anybody to me that's in Spotsylvania would never need to take this. They might as well get on 95.
6,000 staff members going north from the half of them that live in Spotsylvania, they're going to use this bridge. So in Spotsylvania, and they won't get Geico.
So
They're not going to get on I-95.
Plus, it reduces traffic between Bragg Road and Route 1. On Route 3. So that's a big, that's significant when you take traffic off of the interchange, goes on Route 3, so that has it benefits.
Great question, but I swear I'll let you go.
no, you're good. I'm like, please ask questions. I'll try to talk less.
So,
Go ahead.
regarding the 2050 model, so, right now, all decisions that are being made, factoring that model, saying these things are going to happen, or these are things that we think are going to happen. I mean, we're in the initial planning phases right now, right? So like we're saying, okay, this is going to be a thing, or right now are we saying this might be a thing unless someone changes their mind?
I mean, we're still definitely up in it might be a thing, because we still have to require funding, you still have to go through the full NEPA analysis, we still have to do the handoff, we have to have the jurisdictions involved, sign on, and agree to it, so it's still in
It might eventually be a thing.
should we do this? I think that's ultimately what this project is showing, is saying, is this a good idea? Is it gonna produce good benefits? We're looking at what are the environmental costs, what are the land use and personal costs? We're looking at the trade-offs of building a major infrastructure project.
Sure, okay, cool, just looking for clarity.
Is this your last slide?
Second to last, yeah. So again, the consultant's gonna look back on our purpose and need, because that's ultimately kind of what you're at. Should we do this? Are we gonna be able to meet it? Are we looking that we're gonna provide extra connections that when 95 shuts down, it doesn't gridlock the area? Is it going to have the appropriate environmental connectors? Is it going to say, are the traffic operations acceptable? They're gonna provide planning land. And once this is done, this is and beyond Michael Baker's plan, is that they want to kind of narrow the options down to probably 2, maybe a week 3 for the next public meeting. And they're going to say, okay, we think that these corridors have the best kind of trade-offs, either from a traffic operational, environmental, looking at the big picture. And then they're going to come back and say, all right, here's what we found. These are what we think are the 2 that we would recommend advancing. Do y'all agree with it? Pick one, because we can do an additional layer of analysis on that one. Or because we're sitting back, because we have 5 options, technically we're contracted that we can ask for up to 7, but we're kind of saying, if we come back and none of these, do they have to add 2 more options, or there are 2 more options to do? Maybe it's worth saying, no, let's not, and push it aside. But they won't be showing a preferred option until well after public input is done and it goes through the committees one more time. So they're going to do that in November. This is where the public meeting kind of comes in. It's going to be at the Fernette's ballpark. Probably do a tour before, after the area. I've driven all the way down the end of Gordon Shelton before and turned around and come back. It's going to be an open house. They're going to have each one of the options. They're going to have the impacts. And we're still going to be soliciting input. So this is the, come tell us what they're, and they're going to say, they're going to try to whittle it down. They're going to say, this option, it's not, out of all these, it's not the best. Probably they're going to look at a couple of the similar options and say, is there a weaker one of those 2, and try to narrow it down for the community to say, these are kind of the ones, this one works from traffic operations side, this one might work better for the environmental side, whatever their kind of combinations of which ones they're going to do. And then they're going to ask, give us feedback, and we'll work to narrow it down even more.
Leader, can you do me a quick favor? Go to the FAMPO website, policy committee page. Sorry, Chairman, I just will delay you 1 second. I just want to put this up.
Do you want the September agenda?
Yes, please. Then just
It's coming.
pull it up. Click on the river crossing one. There you go. Go down to page 14. Thing. So page 14.
Okay. Right, thank you. It's a different format from the other presentation, so.
The color's a bit off, but yeah, there it is. It's the channel.
I generally accept that y'all are very much more informed. So y'all have been in it, so y'all are following, so yeah. And I have more.
Do we have a time yet? A time?
No, we do not yet. It's most likely going to be late afternoon, 4 to 6 window-ish. But we haven't nailed that down because we're still working with consultants in the facility. We got the date, we have the evening, we got that settled down. We're like, we'll settle the time in a little bit.
Is this the appropriate format? So this is kind of what I was asking about earlier, right? When are we soliciting more comments?
Yeah.
Al's presentation, you know, may have some actual impact for somebody to take a look.
Absolutely.
So would this be the appropriate format, or do we need
Yes.
to, do we need to push it to FAMPO and say, consider this, or maybe Al
Yeah.
takes his
Both.
show on the road to FAMPO?
And all.
Thanks.
Anybody got any other comments for John on this subject?
The only question I have is, you know, considering the public meeting here, again, it's probably more of a board of supervisor responsibility, but I guess my question is based upon the proposed scenarios, for example, the one for Green Bank, do those citizens get like specifically notified to attend, to offer? to public comment to become educated on a proposed project that may potentially impact their home. You know, as Al and I have noted, even, you know, you take your 250 foot, right? Okay, even if all you do is take the road improvement, some of those homes are so close to the road, you're gonna have no choice but to eminent domain them. I mean, you just aren't. And to me, I understand the project doesn't happen overnight, but if you truly want public comment, as a former board of supervisor, the ones who are gonna be impacted the most are the ones I wanna hear from.
There are people on Greenback Road who have already been coming from.
Okay, good.
This is the third public hearing so far, and there will be at least one more during the engineering phase, maybe two more. So every time we do one, we ask the Stafford County to put it on their website, to send it to everybody, to put it on the Spotsylvania website, to send it out, to put it on the city's website. We put a 2,500 people bulk email out to say, please come.
Okay,
We talk to the newspaper and the radio stations, and they frequently put out a little story saying, hey, this is your chance, you better come, this is what's going to happen. We had the Fredericksburg Advance online publication come here on yesterday. They're preparing an article
Okay,
on this,
okay.
just put out to all of their readers. What else do we do? We do a whole range of advertising, and there've been people from the Stafford communities that are most affected by the multiple options are Greenbank Road, the Celebrate Virginia folks, and then the community around where Alan Watkins lives. And we've had many people from each of those three communities already attend these public meetings. We've even done house meetings, and people are informed.
How involved is VDOT in this at all? Any?
So VDOT is on the stakeholder group.
I mean,
They attended every time we have a stakeholder meeting.
they could put out some VMS boards or something along a couple of those routes, and let everybody know what that. I've seen that
Public involvement
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause not everybody listens to the country station, not everybody buys the Freelance Star, you know? Everybody gets their stuff from everywhere.
Yeah.
But,
I mean,
but if you're driving down Celebrate Virginia Parkway and you put a VMS board that says, listen, we're getting ready to affect you, would you like to come to this meeting?
just scroll up to that big chart again with all the colors. I'm not officially telling you this, but just look at that. To get option D to be viable, you're gonna have to freaking, you know, do I don't know what.
Yeah.
It's unlikely that that's gonna be the chosen option. Just look at the environmental scan. If we were to proceed with that option right now.
Yeah, but you gotta unhook it, Green Bank, and you gotta have another column, you gotta have option E. You gotta take D's alignment across the river, we're talking about a bridge there. I don't, let's just look at where your bridge is, but that includes taking it all the way up Green Bank and coming all the way down a creek to tie it into Commerce Drive.
Yeah.
That's where you're getting all those bad numbers
So
from.
the alternative proposal that you're making is basically option C with a bridge further down. It's
Okay.
option C.
Okay.
We're talking about option C with a different name because it's option C's impact.
I like option.
Just moving the bridge
Well,
further
I'm
to the
starting
west.
to lean
That's all
towards
it does.
Rupert's, but
It's the same thing.
That's true, the client thing, and they're gonna actually build this in, it's, I believe it's in our contract. They're gonna look at the environmental costs of not building the bridge from a transportation perspective, because there is BNT pollution impacts that have no factors. So this isn't gonna be the only environmental, but this is what they're doing that's outside the modeling.
I love it.
If you've got math, you'll count those and there's 6. And the 6th one is don't do anything.
Because here's the option, the best option, because we still don't know the full traffic outputs yet, is that, let's just assume that D is the best. But if you can get 98% of D's benefits with a option B2 or B1 that's less impactful, that's not a better trade-off. It's like, how far is the difference going to be? Where's the model going to tie into Route 17? Because I definitely know that impact on Route 17, the impact on Route 3, impact on other people's neighborhoods that you might not think Fall Hill will have an impact. One of those, until we kind of know that, then we can start with the big picture with the cost to say, what's the trade-off and the best options, because it could be too much impact, too expensive, and not enough transportation input, and therefore maybe it is Rupert's no build scenario that it's not worth it.
I'm gonna say one last sentence and then I'm gonna leave because I tend to talk too much in these meetings and it's actually your meeting. If you look at those columns, it literally gets worse as you go further to the right. Right? So you're gonna have to do a lot of.
I feel like you want A. Do you just want A?
No,
here?
no, B, look at B.
Let's just go with
Look at
A.
B1.
Yeah.
B1 is a very good option, right?
Mhm.
It has far less environmental impacts. So B1 is a very good option. Option A is a good option. But D and even C, they're not.
But no bills, look at no bills. Woo.
Do you need a ride? I'll take you home.
We're looking at about option B1, curving around the development, we're saving 6 acres of development. But what are the trade-offs? We are now consuming a little bit more of the floodplain, consuming a little bit more of the preservation area. And so it's gonna be like, that's literally what the consultants are gonna do, is piece all together and say, okay, what's kind of the most optimum option? Because at the end of the day, are those 6 acres biggest hurdle? Are they gonna save a project? Maybe, but also it might not be, and we have to factor in that this has less preferred balance like it.
One of the conservation easements has a clause in it that allows a river crossing. So, and so you would think that easement, you would take that easement away from this change.
Yeah, I was trying to find an easement, but I don't have it on this one.
Yeah, it's on, right there at the top. It says, options, B1 and B2 impact the conservation easement by 27 acres and 33 acres. What I'm saying is that the conservation easement has a clause that allows a river crossing, then, that conservation easement should be taking out of the total there, or at least split up, saying that the 33 acres, had 17 acres of it has a clause saying, that it can have a river crossing versus the rest.
Yeah, it's
I don't
only
think
for
it
the
should
north
all
side.
be lumped together, because it makes it look like there's more of an impact.
So you can slide a gap, a 200 and some foot gap on the north side. You don't have that on the south side, and the bulk of the conservation easement is south. So they are kind of factoring some of that. easement
But
language.
that easement can be moved also.
On the north side, yeah,
Yeah.
that can slide. On the south side, it can't.
Does this study anything on Route 3?
Yes, that's in the traffic model.
Because
Absolutely.
as a Spotsylvania guy talking about this project, I feel like my hands are tied by my board. Okay, where they took us out of the study, so therefore we really ain't got nothing to talk about.
Spotsylvania is still a stakeholder in all of these meetings, so they are at the table.
I understand.
Yeah, including the environmental stuff too, even though it's outside.
But I'm saying is there was a proposal to make the Mall Road go down to Harrison Road. That was the case.
Should have been built.
That would, if that was combined with this, it would reduce traffic on Route 3 all the way to Salem Church Road and reduce traffic on Salem Church Road. And that, where it comes at Harrison Road, it actually lines up
With
with
Southwest
South
Parkway.
Point.
That's correct.
And if that would continue down South Point and then veer over and go to, Route 17 there, at Route 1, that particular road corridor from Route 610 in Garrisonville all the way to Route 17
One homeowner,
in Spotsylvania.
one homeowner stopped them all right.
The only problem with that is you got two major roads you're talking about there that only a quarter mile from the interstate.
Yeah.
We need an outer connector type that is further out than just a quarter of a mile from the interstate. I mean, we can get on Route 3 and go to
The closer you
126.
get to 95, more people will use the road and it'll be more beneficial to more people. The further you go out, the cost rises, the impacts rise. And some of the costs are gonna be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times what it would cost for the closer. So you're gonna push it out, you're gonna require a toll road, less people are gonna use it, and it's gonna be 20 years further down the road. So we need both, but we need to start out closer in where more people can use it.
We built Spotsylvania Parkway from the subdivision I live in, and the one across the street was done with proffers. And if we hadn't built it, Spotsylvania would be in trouble right now, I can tell you that. And we should have built, the county should have continued it on, right on around, all the way to Route 3, but didn't.
We have to deal with circumstances we have now.
Any other comments or questions for this subject?
Oh,
Alan?
Regarding the easements, I just wanted to know how obstructive is it? Like, for example, on the south part of the river, the ones that are there, whether they're coal-held or not. For any of the options, does that become such a strong priority point that it eliminates those choices?
So at least speaking with the Virginia Outdoor Foundation, who told them that there's a, if VDOT has the option to go through them or go around, they go around. That could be a major hindrance for any projects because that's normally, it ties it up legally for a while. It can be, it's not just buying out that land, it has to be land and trade, and they're gonna look to have multiples of what you're taking. So talking about, say, 20 acres, they're probably gonna come back and say, where's 100 acres of? Just in a very sensitive area that they have to go out of the park. That said, easements are a obstacle, they're not the end all, because then you're gonna have to start looking at other factors, because is it just getting back to the cost, and this is kind of for a lot of environmental, you kind of have to take cost out the window for a second, but then reinsert it at the very end. Is the cost to go around going to be that much more than the cost to go through an easement? And that's something that has to be wrestled with. So knowing what easements are in the way is a very big deal. So if you're going to build an expensive road with the expensive bridge or an expensive part of the easement with a lot of property, because the other item is easements are a very weird thing with co-held easements. If you're doing one that's so close to it, like a residential area, they might have granted part of the easement to each one of the property owners adjacent to that stream. And so that now you're needing to get the agreement and sign off of 40 easement co-holders versus just one that might be, say, the city of Fredericksburg holding an easement. So it's complicated. That's the best way I can explain it. And it's a big hurdle. The Outdoor Foundation likes to say, like being a hurdle, and not, we'll get something that benefits them out of the exchange, but it's also not a complete deal stop.
And the other thing would be regarding developments such as, for example, this new Steubenville one. How much of a potential obstacle could something like that, or how would you work around that?
Right now, they've graded the property, they've added a curb cut, but that is not a improved development. So it's kind of a Schrodinger's catch point. Until it becomes approved, it doesn't exist. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't exist. It's just not, you don't account for unapproved projects.
Right.
Because even approved projects don't come to fruition because the finances might not work out.
And I saw stormwater piping there, so that's very suspicious. I thought it was a grading plan, but they got pipes there, there's something going on.
All right, I'm sure the river crossing will come up again in another meeting. Let's move on to the tip of amendments and modifications while you're standing up there.
I'll make it very easy. The only one currently that's really soliciting public comment is the, I'm blanking on the first one, German Point Drive extension, their allocated fundings to kind of get PE and engineering rolling. It's a lot bigger of a project, but this is first $2.5 million worth of funding coming through for that. That's currently being added to the tip. It's a new project. They're going into PE and engineering, and so they're looking for approval for that. All the other.
That one,
Hmm?
before we move on, 2507.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna talk about a real project that has funding, and I'm sorry, it's not a study, but. So 2507, $2.5 million to 5 miles between Germana Point Drive and stop right there. Was anybody aware of that project?
Yes,
A little bit.
yes, yes.
It's
been going on for-
Where it came.
Going on for
Was
about
it
10 years.
Scale or was it?
Yes.
It is, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
In the future, when you put projects up like that, is there any way to have a map for visual?
Now, we've only been asking that for a couple
Yeah,
of years.
we would love to be able to do that, but that's kind of outside what FAMPO can do at this moment. So we can, really what the trick is grab that UPC, go plug into VDOT, they maintain all the project scopes and scales. If it's a new project, it's kind of hit and miss because even they don't always do the big pages for that, so.
Al, what's your consultant rate? Maps?
Yeah,
Just, I'm so free, so.
We were talking about that project and the cost on that, according to VDOT, jumped in 6 months' time from 42 million to 70 million. And all of a sudden we had to drop it, but then they came back a little while later and says, well, now recent bids dropped back again. Now we can put it back on the table. So it came back up. So we need that job to try to eliminate some of the problems we've got at South Point.
Look like parallels.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, like a.
Well, it goes around and comes out over near Hooters,
By the old
the Hooters bypass.
Yeah, they do away with it. Thank you. That's great.
there's wetlands down in there.
And it's just saying.
There's 50 foot of right of way reserved for that road. I don't know if there's enough to get it through there, but listen, I gave Spotsy supervisors the numbers on it 10 years ago. And it's now required as part of the VA hospital project by the feds. So that's the reason it's being pushed now. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Rupert. I move for approval of resolution 2507, 2505, 2506, 2508, and 2509, 2510, and 2511.
I'll second consent agenda. Nice.
Any discussion?
I looked at some of those and I really question them and I really don't wanna rubber stamp every project there without going over them.
The only one we're moving money on is the first one.
So the only one.
Most of them, you're just allocating a public comment period.
Right.
So there's no issue with that, but I did want to understand, the third one, where we're modifying the funding for Rappahannock Area on Aging.
Yeah, they're getting their standard allotment of funding and they're rolling over an existing project. It's about 300,000. 400,000. It's a part of their.
So it's funding that was already there.
Yeah.
It's just
It's
being,
an existing project.
just
They eventually get a
moving it.
deposit.
got it,
into
okay. And then, the only other one that wasn't public comment was, number 5. That was,
Yeah, this is an existing project that had, I think their initial dates was they were gonna spend this in FY 22. They've since, they paused it and had to roll over the funds to.
okay, so it's not really a modification, it's just a reallocation.
Yeah, well, that's what modified, if they
I
kind of move money
Yeah.
between it. so
Got it,
becomes
okay.
modified.
But just so that we understand, you're
Yeah.
not changing
It's not a
numbers or
project.
changing projects and that type
The
of.
project exists, they're just changing a detail of that without a major cost escalation.
Thank you.
One of them had to do with a driving simulator. And
Driving training and driving simulator, yes.
yeah.
That's number 7.
Feel comfortable with.
It's just for public comment though. It's not. it's-
Yeah.
It's open public comment so that you can then. comment.
Okay, so it's just public comment.
Yes.
Public.
Right, yeah. This is just for, we're approving for them to have public comment on.
Call the motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Okay.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Staff reports.
Policy committee met in August. They got a very in-depth, kind of discussion about the ERA, with the, bridge closure. That was actually a pretty heavily discussed item. There we go. Becky Golden's been actually going and looking at, kind of crash statistics, particularly around 95, and trying to kind of tease that out because the data is a little bit murky, mostly because depending on how whoever's inputting the data on the crash statistics, they are kind of throwing everything either onto the local lanes or onto the through lanes. Like they're not being accurately geocoded, but they do see trends in the crash rates going on. This was a carryover from a previous discussion that we're constantly kind of poking at kind of how, for example, the on-ramps and other crashes are being done. We are being coded, analyzed, and we can tell if it's a truck-related crash as well. We can kind of dig down there. That is something that we are currently tracking, because yes, we have noticed that there's issues there, particularly in Stafford County from 130 all the way up. They got the previous version of the river crossing update, and they've had other letters to support. So Caroline County requested an opt-out of the transportation award, and King George received a TAP award funding. Their smart scale project summaries, and they got a kind of a brief going on of a few of those. I don't think there's one thing that they did discuss was y'all's presentation with road user fees, that they actually pulled that up and had a small discussion about that. So, and then for TAC.
Wait, question?
Yes.
The policy committee. So they, it should be noted that they reauthorized the resolution for remote participation policies. There's no change there.
You have to do that every year now.
Yeah. But secondly, they've changed the policy committee or they're considering to change the policy committee to allow 2 online meetings a year. And so we'll see how that goes, but in the future, we might want to take that up as an option for us.
So yeah, that was to give them an option that, say, if they need to call an additional meeting, it gives them an option to do it even if, say, they couldn't meet.
So it's additional meeting, it wasn't regularly scheduled?
It could be either, depending on the chair's discretion, but the intent was if they had to cover another one, and let's just say Supervisor X is in Honduras, they can remote it.
Oddly specific, Honduras.
I just, I'm like, forget there was a supervisor that was abroad recently that he called in. It was Honduras.
All right,
And then, like the TAC, okay, the TAC, yeah, they were looking through a lot of their, the tip modifications. For scroll down, they had a brief discussion over, actually, I'll kind of do a smart scale, just how that process went. Of course, this is local staff discussing that. We're starting talking about changing how we allocate CTAC as DVG funding and the methodology associated with that, of instead of having all counties kind of throw 5 or 10 projects at FAMPO and see which one sticks, to actually work out a formula that divides the money out, and then the localities pick their priority projects. It's an option that's done similar in Virginia. And then we're looking at the LRTP. We're starting asking what projects do we need to add, subtract, or not gaining ground, and just looking at that as a update to that. And finally, the FAMPO travel demand model. The new full fat version is coming down the pipeline, so that there's been a heavy update to that process. Major changes to like how employment distribution, growth distribution, like we now have Kalahari that's going to be in the model versus when it wasn't. Celebrate Virginia Parker was not technically in the previous model as a road. It always had to be manually added, but you basically keep a list of every single project that you had to use to manually add. Now it's built in. Of course, there's going to be new projects that are going to be manually added, but we've had a very big update to that, and we're looking at slowly rolling that in. If you want to kind of look to the future, you can actually look at Lita's presentation that's on the policy committee agenda, that's slowly looking at some of the big pictures of the first runs of that model and inputs, particularly to vehicle hours traveled. It's a big jump. So, and that's the TAC.
Alrighty, member reports. Anyone have a member report? Rupert?
Yeah. I wanted to alert you to look under member reports on your agenda for the next meeting. Because I'm asking to have a link put to an article that I've read since last meeting. Now, many of you know that I've been bad mouthing the American transportation policy for a long time. Because not only is it wasting trillions of dollars, it's causing all kinds of environmental and social harm. Now, many of you might not believe this coming from me, but this article spells it out very well. And it spells it out to some great length, so that if you're already on my side, you might want to skip reading it. But if you want to know where I'm coming from, you might want to read it. This article differs from other articles I've read. An article I read back in the '60s, that explained the problem is what got me on this. I wasn't even aware of it back then, because I was just out of school. And I also saw another article, I think maybe in the '70s or '80s, that spelled it out. And I haven't seen one since then. They might have been out there, but I missed them. Anyway, this is a chance to hear it from the pros. And it also goes into some length about how we might correct this problem, which is something I've never seen in previous articles. So just wanted you to be on the lookout for that. Thanks.
This, I say, I'd like to have a presentation at the next meeting. A slideshow and so forth. Not only the river crossing, but of the trail system, park system.
Okay. Any other member?
Larry, did you have anything?
No, nothing.
Okay.
I got, anybody else? Anybody? I got a couple things. Number one, I was on vacation, I don't know when, a couple weeks ago. And I just happened upon the governor of Virginia. And I got to have him as an audience for a little bit, and I begged him to help us in our transportation woes in Fredericksburg. And he said he would. So I just want to report that back. The other thing is, if you notice, on 17 between Stafford Lakes and almost Hartwood, you see white flagging all the way down the side. On Route 2 from Shannon Airport, in fact, north of Shannon Airport, from Deep Run all the way to New Post, there's a white flagging all the way down the side of that road. Mills Drive, which is 17 bypass, has multiple fiber optic lines being run down the side of that at the moment. And what I'm getting at is, and I'm involved in a little job for the Spotsylvania County right now, building a traffic circle at Chancellor and Old Plain. And where we're at in that project is waiting on Verizon to move 5 lines that are in the way. And they're going to replace it with 1. I said, well, how do you replace 5 with 1? He said, because 4 of them are outdated. Okay. A lot of the reason our road projects are so expensive is because we're paying to update either the utility department or Verizon or Virginia Power's equipment facilities at the transportation expense. That's the reason our prices are, that's the reason they're so high. When it comes down to construction might be half, maybe less than half of these numbers that we see in these transportation projects, mostly because of right of way and utility relocation. Now, what I have not figured out is anybody anywhere, 17 bypass route, for example, we own, or VDOT owns the right of way, the 4-lane that road, has since 1972 when they built the original 2 lanes. Now, who's minding the store? Because now rumblings, and it might come into this room here shortly, is talk about 4-lane in that road. Okay. Who's minding the store? Here we got, and this fiber optic line is being built for Amazon and these data centers. Okay. And that's not something that's going to be easy to move once they get up and running. So is it going to be in conflict of the 2 new lanes? And who's Who's looking at that? I don't know that anybody is. Same way with Route 2, where they're running a sewer line and a water line all the way down Route 2, and VDOT's chasing it with $60 million of smart scale money to improve, I think, 1.5 miles to basically from the city line to Shannon Airport, $60 million, which I think is crazy. Knowing dirt work numbers, but anyway, that stuff bothers me. I don't think a lot of people are looking at that. The other thing is, and you alluded to the traffic circle at Banks Ford and why it's taking so long. I can tell you, there's a lack of people that do construction work. A big lack. Okay. And what you find are guys between my age and Rupert's age, very few of us that know what we're doing anymore. And there's no young kids getting into that business. Okay. So me and the governor talked about this as well. We've given blue collar workers a stigma. Okay. Everyone's had to go to college. You gotta go to college, gotta go to college, you gotta go in debt, become whatever. But we need people to keep the lights on, keep the phones working, keep the water in the water lines, the sewer in the sewer lines, the roads. Okay. And me and him discussed that actually at length. And it's something I'm very passionate about. And I've talked to the Spotsy education people, and I think we need to do something different. We need to get in front of these kids, not in high school. You got to get them down in 6th grade. Okay. And you got to explain to them what there is to do in this world, because they're not being shown that. And I'll be honest with you, I had 250 employees back in the early 2000s. I would go to the local high schools on career day or career, whatever. One kid, I think, in 3 years, I went to those things. I think I got one kid come to work for me. And none of the rest of them not. They don't want to work outside. But that is the problem. That's why your traffic circle's taking an extra month, because they don't have the people. They're not there. That's the reason all these traffic barrels and traffic cones are sitting out there longer than they need to, because they're not so much as the heads, but the competency level. It's not there. And I can tell you firsthand, it ain't there. And that's the problem. And that might also add to the money problem.
Yes, right.
And a lot of the contractors have multi-jobs, and they work on this job for a little bit, and then they have things they have to do on the next one, and they work on that one, and then they have to come back to this one while the concrete is curing over here for a couple weeks, so a week.
While they're waiting on Verizon to move 5 lines.
Yeah. So that's why you see them.
It's crazy.
They're moving back and forth, but depending upon what's going on in that job, so they're not doing anything for a couple weeks.
Any other,
I just want to say, I agree with you on the infrastructure being in the right of way. It's definitely a problem. Stafford is in the process of building fiber optics to all their major facilities like schools and fire stations and so forth. I think that might be a problem with future road widening. It'd just be a shame to put new fiber optics in and then have to relocate it.
yeah, I mean, especially if we know it's on the list of something that we're going to do in the next 5 or 10 years, at least somebody look at it and put it in the right spot. And a very good example on the project I'm working on, Verizon was going to come out and put it in wherever they felt like they were going to put it in. I said, no. No, I'll be out there to watch you put it in. And you're going to put it at the right grade so that when I go to do this work, I'm not cutting a new one in half. Okay? And they're like, it was I'm like, this is scary. It's scaring me. Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've been doing it for 30 years now, but it's starting to scare me a little.
Thanks for being on top of that, because it's a problem, adding expense that doesn't need to be.
If
It's just by simply.
I'm just seeing just a little piece of this. I'm worrying that it's going on.
Right depth.
You see what I'm saying? All right. Any other comments or issues or future agenda items? Joe's got his thing.
staff does have a request that we would like for CTAC to do. We would like to have CTAC kind of develop its standards for CTAC members and the materials that they present. I want you all to tell me what standards you want. Because we've got some feedback that we don't like PowerPoints or whatnot, and FAMPO cannot necessarily host material. It'd be the same as printing out a big thing. We're okay with it coming in, but we want y'all to set what y'all want as far as what you can, if you're gonna bring materials to FAMPO and present, what format and everything do you need, as well as FAMPO staff wants to discuss it to make sure it's meeting accessibility requirements.
Okay, so put that as an agenda
Yes.
item. The other thing I would like to add is, if memory serves me correct, there's something called the George Washington Toll Commission.
Yes,
I would like to learn more about that.
okay, I think Ian is the weird de facto
Yes.
chair. It's a thing that was created that has no money.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to know about that. Follow me on this one, Rupert. Al,
We are supposed to, at some point in time, have a meeting with the consultant where they come in. When would that be best located?
It's probably going to be, probably early January.
Okay,
So then it'll be after the
public hearing.
after the public hearing, you'll have that, depending on what we discussed with the consultants, we might actually include small hearings that basically become part of the public comment that are designed, that's gonna happen around the meetings, because we know that we're not gonna have any in December.
okay, so our input would be better after the November 20th meeting.
At and after, yes.
Okay, if one was to put a PowerPoint together for that, we'd send it to you? Or who would we send it to?
For the who to use, the consultant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a public
No.
hearing and not,
He's wanting to know, is can Al's presentation be part of that public comment
Yeah,
period?
you can submit it in any format, actually. That for me, it's more for the CTAC agenda. If you add it, we need it in a certain.
right,
okay, is it an actual public hearing or is it?
It's gonna be a public hearing, yes.
Okay, so,
Public hearing, not a public meeting?
Public comment.
Okay, so it's a public meeting.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
but it's not like a formal public hearing.
No,
Okay.
see you, David. All right, any other future agenda item additions?
Rupert, I move for German.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Was what? Was what?
There's I two over there.